Hi, my name is Gil Robertson, president of the African American Film Critics Association. Today, we are thrilled to have two of our favorite showrunners, creatives on as guests, Deman and Nkechi, responsible for the NBC hit series Found. We're going to introduce you to our AAFCA members on the call today, starting with our guest facilitator, Reggie Pounder in Chicago, Carolyn Hines in Toronto, Philippe Patterson in Washington, D.C., Chris Stiles in Cleveland, Ohio, and Christine, we don't know what market you're in. Where are you?
Tampa, Florida.
In Tampa, Florida. I'm going to let you guys do what you do so well, and I will see you on the other side.
We find missing people who have slipped through the cracks, and we bring them home.
I am going to find your son.
Gabby, where is the line?
There is no line. I will do anything to bring people home.
New case.
We make quite the partnership, don't we?
Congratulations. This is such a fascinating series. Right?
Thank you.
I got through the first pilot episode. I'm so upset at you because you put me in turmoil already. And I'm real upset about that. So this goes for both of you guys. Like, I'm really upset. I love the concept of focusing on African-American children. I think that's the applaud of the first one. Second question is, why such a twist in the first episode? Why give us this right away?
Well, you know what? To me, it's funny because actually that part of the story, the twist at the end, was such a point of discussion when I was taking the show out and pitching it years ago. You know, some people were like, oh, okay, maybe we don't reveal that she's doing that till like episode 4, so we give people time to fall in love with her, and then we reveal. And I felt very strongly that it needed to be revealed in the pilot, because I want you to understand the character you're rooting for. And let's be clear, we're rooting for Gabby. You know, maybe her full healing from her trauma did not take, clearly, because there is a man in her basement, but we're rooting for her. And at first we were rooting for her to succeed in terms of the cases she's working on, the family she's built, getting her life back together. And we're still rooting for all of that. But now we're also rooting for, the healing we thought you did over the last 20 years, clearly there wasn't enough of. Or clearly there were other things that happened in your life that triggered little landmines inside her that she thought she dealt with. And so now we're rooting for that healing to really take place, and for her to really be able to reclaim her life from what happened to her as a teenager. And part of that is going to be dealing with the situation she's created for herself in that basement.
Hi, Christine from Party Chat Podcast News. And first of all, within the first 2 minutes and 43 seconds, I was hooked by Gabby. And like, especially that first conversation and the fact that she presents that way. I think Shanola Hampton is amazing as an actress in that role, and how she takes on the presence. And a lot of us have talked amongst ourselves about the disparity in high profile missing persons cases when it comes to race, but I've never seen a project hit that topic head on. So my question that I wanted to ask you guys is, I'm sure that you were anticipating criticisms, especially when people like to use the word woke when it comes to anything that is for diversity. What emboldened you guys to not only create the project, but continue on and make this come to fruition?
If the criticism is out there, I've developed a beautiful filter to it, because I've purposely shut it out. I mean, honestly, it was the whole purpose behind the show. The whole purpose behind the show from conception was, how do I use what I love to do, which is create television, to draw attention to something that deeply disturbs me in my heart, both as an African-American woman, but also as the mother of 2 Black boys. And so as I was doing the research on why this disparity exists, because I didn't want to just go, okay, well, you know, cops are biased, media is biased. Bias comes from somewhere. So what is contributing to this happening? And as I was doing the research and sort of seeing the role that, yes, systemic issues play, but also the role that public relations, power, money, so many things play into what gets media attention, what gets focused on. And it's, listen, this is nothing new to us in our community, but there's certain disadvantages you're just born into that are precursors to you not being able to achieve the success you're supposed to. And to me, public relations specifically was one of those things that I believe is adding a benefit to some people when they go missing and severely lacking in other marginalized communities when they go missing, because you're told to call 911, you put up the posters and that's it. And then you're usually going to work and trying to juggle your job and the rest of your family members and all the things. It never even occurs to you that, oh, I need to do something that is going to force the media and force the cops to put my missing loved one at the forefront. And so it was as I was doing all of that research that the idea of Gabby Mosley started to form in my head. The idea of someone who had been through this as a teenager and had to save herself because no one else was looking, and then specifically went into the field of public relations, and then used that to go into the field of crisis management to focus on being part of the solution, so that no one else had to experience what she experienced. So that was always the intention behind the show. And then everything else came after it, because once I sort of had grabbed onto that idea and I'm like, okay, Gabby Mosley is my key. I'm like, okay, now how do I make sure they don't take us off the television and keep us on there? And that was when I started to come up with, okay, what happens to survivors so many years later? What do their lives look like? What could be trigger points for them? And if one of those trigger points are hit, how far would they go? What does healing look like when it's done right in our community? What does healing look like when it hasn't quite taken? And that is literally what Found is about. We've got a whole group of survivors of some kind of missing person trauma in some way. And for all of them, their coping mechanisms look different. Their healing looks different. Gabby is our most extreme version of it. But it really is a study on, as much as it is a study on how we deal with the disparity and how we look for missing people and how we deal with finding loved ones, it's also a study on healing, on trauma within our community, within other marginalized community. It is a study on love, empathy, non-traditional family, because at the end of the day, with all the thriller and all the exciting aspects, I'm hoping what our audience is still taking away from this is hope, love, empathy for your neighbor, non-judgment of people's traumas and how they're healing from it, and how we can all play a role in turning each other's traumas into superpowers and into better people. So all of that got thrown in a pot with some gumbo and some everything else, and it got stirred up, and Found is what got spit out, And then as I'm interviewing directors who I want to not just execute the vision, but understand it and elevate it, preferably to heights that I never could have thought of. That's where Domain came in. And it was meeting one. Child, I was recovering from surgery. I was all the things. I'm all discombobulated, and Domain pops up on my screen with all these amazing ideas. She so got the heart behind the show and what I was trying to achieve. She had her own life experiences and thoughts around all of these themes and brought that in such a creative way and elevated the script so much that I couldn't fathom partnering with anyone else on the pilot than who I did.
Thank you.
It's true.
If I could just say, everything that this phenomenon has just said to you is why I love her and why this show is so fantastic. And I have to say, when I first read the script, the things that she embedded in it, I was like, oh yeah, that's what I know. That's what we talk about. Everybody knows, we all know all this. And it actually wasn't, NK, it wasn't until the show came on and I watched the pilot myself that it hit me like, oh, millions of people are hearing millions of people are hearing this. Finally, millions of people are hearing the things that we all knew in the community. We go missing, nobody's looking for us. And that was really incredible. And then being at the Latino Film Festival and showing it, there was an audience where people who don't look like us were like, wait, oh, we didn't know this. And I'm like, that's the show. And that's the power of what you can do using your voice to actually change something. And that's what Nkechi does with all of her projects. I'm so honored to have had this opportunity to collaborate with her.
Thank you both. You guys are so inspiring, especially the way that you guys talk about each other. It's absolutely beautiful. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Philippe from Tajia Magazine. How are you? Thank you for joining us. This is a very diverse cast with very interesting characters. How important was it for you to represent a variety of backgrounds and perspectives and characters and found? And how does it impact the diversity of storytelling?
It was very important. The characters were written to be diverse. It wasn't accidental the way we cast them. It was intentionally written because while I'm hyper aware of this issue because of our community, because of the Black community, I'm also hyper aware that there are other communities that also are victim of this kind of disparity. And so while I was going to lead with our story in the pilot, because I felt that was important, it was important to me that it's not just us. It is our LGBTQ plus community. It is our addict community. It is anyone that America and quite frankly, broadly, the world has deemed for whatever reason, their lives are less worthy of resources being dedicated to in the same way. And so we had an episode that we already aired that was about a sex worker going missing. And that the idea that we pass judgment on someone's profession choice and therefore they deserve the worst possible thing happening to them is absolutely ridiculous as a society. And so, it's the reason why I fought for that to be the second episode. And everyone was like, it's great. Could we maybe do it in episode 7? I'm like, no, we're coming out the gate with the stories we want to tell, the communities we want to hit, and the statement we want to make so that people understand the show they're watching and they understand it's only going to get bigger and more powerful, and we're just going to be more emphatic with each episode. And so the way the cast was sort of designed was to enhance that. The idea that it is this motley crew of amazing people who all have these different strengths and have all experienced some form of missing person trauma in a different way and cope with it in a different way and have figured out how to turn it into a superpower to use to save someone else's life. You look at someone like Margaret, who has suffered the worst imaginable thing a parent could suffer. It is literally my living nightmare. And somehow, even though she has no resolution to her problem, is able to use what she does best to help other people not experience the pain she's experiencing. That's a beautiful thing. And then, we have Don, who's Southeast Asian, who's Indian, and who is, yes, he's the muscle of the group, and is someone who I love this character so much. I cannot wait for you guys to see what happens later in the season. I cannot wait for you guys to see sort of all the beautifulness that Jermaine helped bring out of him in the pilot and continue on through the season in terms of stereotypically what we think of when it comes to muscle of the group, what we think of when it comes to men and trauma, right? Because it's like, oh, they're men, they can take it. It doesn't break them. The hell it doesn't. And we also need to heal men in these communities as much as we worry about the young children, as much as we worry about the women. So all of it was very intentional. And in fact, a domain, I don't know if you want to talk about casting, but so much of back and forth that if the sort of right actor came in and we were like, oh, they're great, but I had a different, we need this dynamic. And then it's like, okay, but maybe if we put that in that role, then now we're looking for a particular type of person in this other role to make the Tetris work.
Yeah, and I love that NK was so open with casting, which is, it's not something that you always get, whether coming in to direct a pilot or as a guest director during the season. Sometimes it's just like, no, we cast these people, you have no say. And I was so grateful that at the end of every kind of call, NK, what do you think? How are you feeling? And we would check in and we would often finish each other's sentences. but I relied on her because she has lived with this idea and this script and this concept for so long to sort of point out all of these cues of what everyone should have and then putting them together, and it just came together so beautifully.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm really interested to see what's going to happen with Zeke, because agoraphobia is not covered too much, but I was happy to see it pop up again. So thank you guys.
Oh, absolutely. Stay tuned. Arlen is, he's a dream to work with. And, when you restrict someone that way, where it's like, he can't leave his house, which means 90% of his interactions with everyone else is via electronics. Having an actor that can take that and make it so dynamic, I argue we probably gave him the most challenging things to deal with because he's doing it through a computer. And that is the way we shot it. Our amazing crew synced up the big LED screens at M&A with the screens and Zeke. So the way they're interacting and you watch it in the episode is absolutely how our actors were engaging with each other, because that isolation, that feeling of I'm so close, but I'm so far is real. And Arlen really wanted to live in that so that he could bring a real authenticity to Zeke. And just, yeah, I'm unbelievably grateful for the amazing talent we have on this show and how generous they were with their heart and souls that they poured into this.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Presser. Here's What Happened on Carolyn Talks podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. And this show, I love shows like this. I like, one of my favorite shows from the 90s was a show called Profiler. And
I love Profiler.
I love Profiler. I watched every single season, every single episode. And then there were shows in like the mid 2000s, like Lie to Me. Mm-hmm. And I love shows like that where each episode is centered around a specific storyline. In this one, rescuing people, but it helps us to get to know the characters more intimately, And I love that this show is about talking about missing people, but it's also talking about the things missing in these people's lives intimately, what they're missing in their connections with each other and what they're missing with regards to like mental health, and even physical health, because like what you mentioned, Zeke, like agoraphobia affects people physically. His symptoms manifest physically. So I love that the show is like talking about what they need to find within themselves using the name found in that context. But you talked about the casting, and I have to tell you, when I saw you cast Paul Gosselaar, I said these people are really trying to get women to be conflicted about hating this monster. So talk to me about casting Shanola and Paul Gosselaar, because these are two extremely attractive people, two extremely dynamic performers, and the way they play off of each other makes this show work and makes the premise of this woman that we root for holding her captor work. Like that, like their interactions are, I love the interactions, but also talk about the whole idea of purposely casting two extremely attractive people in a role like this and having them say, you're the animal, she's keeping you caged, but she's also in a way acting like the zookeeper. And there's something that you guys do where it's like, I noticed that she's always very put together when she goes to see him. And that talks about the trauma, because as a young person, when he kidnapped her, he always wanted her to look pristine, put together. And that's something she hasn't broken away from. And she doesn't realize it. So I want you to talk about that dynamic and the casting, how all of these things really have to work with these characters and make this show really work. Because I was like, I'm like, he's Bae. He was like Bae from my teenage years. Okay, I'm keeping it real. Bae. Be honest.
I need to take you with me wherever I go and talk about this show. Here's the thing. Ted Bundy was an extremely attractive human being. And that is the reality of it. I wanted Sir, because it's sort of so easy. I use the term easy lightly, but it's sort of easy to understand a particular dynamic when the monster looks like a monster. But part of the reason why Ted Bundy got away with what he got away with for as long as he got away with is he was the really attractive guy that girls felt comfortable talking to at the park. He's the attractive guy where if he's like, ooh, I need help picking up this folder, girls would bend down to pick up the folder and not think twice, and then they'd end up in the trunk of his car. And so it was important to me that there was a charisma, a charm to Sir, because I wanted to tell a story of almost, and as the episodes go on and you guys see more episodes and more of the backstory of Gabby and Sir, this will also play a role in it of how you can be around the monster in your life and not realize it until it's too late. And part of that comes from the charm, from the charisma. And so, look, yes, Mark Paul was bae to all of us. I'm like, I put Zach Morris in a basement and made him a serial kidnapper. God help me. They are coming for me. I know, it's Zach. But when I tell you no one else could have played that role, there's just something about it, you know, when you're casting shows like this, you have a wish list of people where you're like, okay, I know this is the list that's never going to happen, but we just so y'all understand the prototype, we're going to go ahead and put these people on the list. And then you get to your realistic casting. When we got the call that Mark Paul was actually interested in talking to us about it, I thought I was being punked because he was on the list that you don't, you know, it's the wish list, it's the prototype, but you don't really expect them. And so, and I was like, wait, seriously? And then he, when I started talking to him on the phone, even the way he'd sort of done his research around, I'll say serial monsters, because it captures serial killers, serial kidnappers, all the serials. And the way he'd sort of was thinking about it and understood what I was going for. I mean, it just felt like there was no one else who could play that role. And quite frankly, when your wish list comes to life, you're like, we'll make it happen. Whatever happens, we'll make it happen. Shanola Hampton, quite frankly, I could put a blow up Michelin Man in front of her, and this woman would have chemistry with it because she's so dynamic. And she was the very first person cast. She was cast before we even brought, you know, Demain. She was essentially cast before we started doing pretty much anything with the pilot. And was so gracious with her time to read with everyone. She sat in on the casting sessions with us and would read with people so that we could sort of get a sense of the chemistry of the family. But they did not do a chemistry read. It was the sort of dynamic personality of Shanola. Your dream wish list says yes, and then you all say a prayer for the table read. And when I tell you the table read, I think they were 2 words into the table read, and it was goosebumps. It was all the things Demain and I are texting each other under the table. It was one of those moments where I'm like, oh, these two, we need to be careful. And it's why in every interview, I'm so clear about this is not a redemption story for Sir. He is a serial kidnapper. He kidnapped a Black girl. He stole a year of her life in physical time. And quite frankly, the next 20 years of her life in terms of trauma. We're not redeeming him. That is not the story we're telling. However, there are reasons why he's the way he is. There are reasons for why he did it. And there's reasons why there is an unhealthy connection between the two. And to me, that's just fun television to play. And I'm always like, I know what my intention is. I know what my instructions were in the writer's room. I know what my writing was meant to do. I know the conversations. I mean, Demain, my tones are like 2 hours. I have long conversations with the directors about everything. And then the beauty of television is you release it to the audience and let them experience it however they experience it. And so for all the people who are shipping Gabby and Sir, I'm like, y'all, that wasn't me. But you also have Shanola and Mark Paul. You have this amazing acting. You have this amazing chemistry. Like, sure, maybe I did add a shaving scene in when she was grooving him, and maybe that one was my bad. But the beauty is I'm letting the audience experience it the way they want to experience it. And that if you're conflicted and you're going to work and arguing with people over whether that's healthy or not, I've achieved my goal. Y'all are talking about the show outside of the show, and in talking about that juiciness, you're also reminding people what the show is about and that we need to do better in society and looking for our missing loved ones. And it's all there as an undercurrent. So.
And Demain, can you talk about that, the writing for them, for the characters? Because woo, fire.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that's all NK. They were both attached before I came on, and I was like, I think the camera test day was the first day that I saw both of them. I knew Mark Paul was Mark Paul, and he's very quiet. He's very, you know, he's put together. He comes, he has ideas, but he's still ready to play. And we talked a little bit about it, and yeah, he had done a lot of research, like kind of maybe too much research. I was like, wait, and he's like, oh, the children go to bed. I put on all, you know, the Jeffrey. I'm like, what? You watch Dahmer at night? Like that's, you know, I'm scary, so I don't like to watch that stuff at night. But he was in it, and he was ready to play. And then Shanola has this like, she just vibrates, her energy. So together, they're just incredibly dynamic. It was a lot of fun to film the scenes with them in the basement because they're just so good and they're so talented. And that was when I started to see the depths of where their relationship could go and how dynamic they were going to be together. And I started to get really excited, like, oh my God, this is going to be, you know, when I read the script, and I'm usually pretty good at kind of predicting, like, okay, that girl's pregnant. All right, the dog's going to jump in the car. They're not going to kill a dog. That's not going to happen. I got to the end of NK's script. I hollered. I screamed. I never in my mind in a million years thought that he was going to be in the basement. So to see it come to life in front of me was like, it was so good. It was so, you know, it's one of those things where for me, a true test is when I'm watching the monitor, if it's so good that I forget to call cut. There were many times when I was like, oh yeah, cut. Okay, right. Okay, we're gonna move on because I'm, you know, give me some popcorn from Crafty. I'm in it. Like, this is good. The two of them together is so good. And I also, something that I'm very grateful to NK for is that first line that he says, was I right? Was she on the property? That wasn't scripted with him off camera. And I really wanted to just drag it out for as long as possible. Like, okay, she's making the tray. We saw her make the tray before. Okay, wait a minute. There's 4 locks here. There were 4 locks in the room where she was kept. All right, she's going in the basement. What's she doing? And then you hear that voice and you're like, huh? And I wanted a beat because I wanted your brain to catch up to what was going on. Because otherwise you would scream the way I screamed when I read the script. And I didn't want you to miss the rest of it, miss the part where he was like, hey, we make a great partnership. We are not partners, you know? So they're really magic together. And I'm so excited. I'm excited to watch tonight. I didn't read any of the scripts, so I'm watching along with everybody else. I'm live tweeting. I can't wait to see what happens tonight.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Reggie Ponder, the Real Critic out of Chicago. And Domain, you just talked about how when you read this, you were like, oh, okay, I couldn't tell where it was going. And I think you guys took us some places that it's probably unexpected. So my question to both of you is that I feel like there's a different sensibility that you brought to this project, both. And I'd like to know if you think you brought something different, because you had me crying, you had me laughing, you had me a little scared. So I'd love to hear from both of you about what kind of sensibilities that you think you brought to this project that you might not have done for your other projects.
Every project I do, it's so specific to the characters. My husband makes fun of me because he's like, your characters are real life people to you. Like they live and breathe in my house. I talk to them out loud. It's a whole process. And so with every project I do, the way my art conforms to that is dictated by the characters. And so I think there's something about Gabby Mosley. There's so much of me in her. I do not have a man in my basement, I promise. But the idea of so much being expected of this strong Black woman as an adult, and feeling the need to be a vigilante savior of sorts because people aren't trying to save us, resonated so much with me that even as I was, when I would pitch the character and it would be something so small, but I'd argue why she had to do it. And then I'd have a whole thing and they're like, oh, it's almost like you lived that. And I'm like, no, that I did live that. Like, that has happened to me. And this is why it's so important that we see this vulnerability, or we see the, it's those things. So I think from that perspective, it's still, like with all my projects, there's a piece of me and a piece of my soul in it. But I think maybe particularly because of who the protagonist is in this one, her age, her need to save the world in some way just to keep breathing, all of that is so personal that I think maybe that is what people are feeling and gravitating to, is the specificity and the personal feeling of, I recognize that woman. And not just Gabby, quite frankly, all of them are based on, I grew up internationally. And so they're little pieces of every member of the cast that are based on real life people from all over the world that I've interacted with, where I'm like, oh, your story deserves to be told. Your story deserves to be, idiosyncrasies of your personality deserves to be on screen. And quite frankly, we so rarely get to see actors of color play those kinds of, they're usually, sort of pigeonholed into certain aspects of, oh, we get that the Black man is this, we get that the Black woman is this, we get that the Indian man is this. And so to be able to flip those on their heads, but flip it on their heads in a very specific way, because those are people I recognize, I think maybe more of that is what is being felt in this project. But I would argue that in terms of tone, in terms of things you don't realize you're feeling because of something you're seeing, that is the magic that Demaine Davis brought to this show and to this pilot. When she's talking about, I want you to always be finding the actors through things, through books, through this feeling like they always operate in the shadows. That was the genius of Demaine. Like, it gave me chills hearing her pitch it that way, because I was like, you get it. You get who these people are. You get why they're always moving. You get, and so Demaine, I'll let you talk about that, but that is a large portion of what you're feeling when you watch it. And that was the genius of Demaine's creative eye.
Well, thank you. Thank you for saying that. I mean, I was going to say the brilliance of NK's writing is when you read it, you're like, okay, I kind of know who Gabby is. Oh, I got a little bit of Gabby in me. You know what? If something like that happened to me, I would do that. If I'm Margaret, I'd be at the bus station. Maybe not every night, but I'd be there a bunch of nights. I would want to get on that roof if I were Don and help that person get down. I would want to help as much as I possibly could if I were Zeke. I would do everything. I would have all the drones, all the tricks, all the things to try to help. And so I feel like she wrote these characters where you find a little bit of yourself in them and you think about, this is what I would do. And then of course the flip is at the end, like, yo, would I have him in the basement though? I don't know. That's a little extra. Okay. And now I have to watch, and now I have to find out what's going to happen. And one of the things that I told NK is, when I was growing up, there was a van that was going around that was snatching kids. And it was never on the news. We all knew about it. I grew up in Roxbury in Boston, Massachusetts. All the Black hoods knew about it. And I saw the van one day. I saw the van. I was by myself. I was across the street. It was like a milk chocolate colored van with rusty wheel wells. The driver had on a clown suit, and I could only see him from behind. You could see that he had ties on the suit. So the suit was kind of dirty. You could see he had jeans, like, and a white t-shirt. And he came from behind the van, and he got in the van and he drove away. And I was like, oh, that's I didn't even think about that until I read the script. And I was like, well, if that stuck with me, and that is probably why I really hate clowns, what are these characters going through who were actually abducted, who actually had real trauma? And also how admirable that they've, exactly as Gabby says, like, turn your trauma into something beautiful. That's what Margaret does. That's what Zeke does. That's what all these characters are doing. So that was something that I wanted to incorporate. And I thought, they must be, even though they're going forth, they have to keep moving, because if they sit still, then they're going to have to think about their pain. So they got to keep moving, not only because we have to save this child, we have to save this sex worker, we have to save this elderly person, but if we sit long enough, then we're going to think about all the stuff that happened to us, and who wants to think about that? So they keep moving. And then shadows also played a really big part of it, because I would imagine that even in the day, you just don't feel safe. When I saw that van, it was daytime. Like, it was morning, So what is it like for someone who sees things? There's always shadows. There's always something coming out of the shadows. And so those were the things that I thought of, but it was all born from NK's script, all born from her idea.
Well, obviously you're a great pair. So thank you for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, NK. I got a question about the writing. When you're writing these scripts and you're writing the episodes, are you drawing that from real life kidnapping, real life things? Like, because we've seen crime and drama shows that you can say, oh, I get it from right there. Oh, I seen something like this. Are you doing it? And does it help shine a light for some of those ideas or creative ideas you get from that?
You know, we're not a strict ripped from the headlines, sort of the way Law and Order SVU, you know, I lived in New York, so I'd be like, "Ooh, I remember that case. I remember when that happened." And for us, it was sort of a mix of being inspired by a lot of the cases we've heard over time, and then, quite frankly, the generosity of my fellow writers in the writers' room who all shared so many aspects of their lives. And that was the other gift of the show, is you never know what people have been through. You never know what people are still going through, that when people were willing to openly be like, oh my gosh, this happened to me as a teenager in college. I've never really talked about it, but I would love if we could use an aspect of this because it really changed my life in this way. And being so generous with their stories and their experiences, and all of that sort of got put together to come up with the cases we came up with. And then there were times where we would come up with cases just from the creativity of our mind. And then we'd be like, nah, that's too crazy. We can't do that. And then one of the writers would come back the next day and be like, I looked it up. This actually happened in Nebraska and it was this and this. No matter how crazy an idea we came up with that we thought, nah, that's pushing the envelope too much, someone would find something in real life where something in that vein had happened. And so our rule was, if it can happen in real life, it can happen on our show. Like, we wanted to maintain that groundedness of, you know, we have a couple of cases coming up that at the time, there was a lot of discussion back and forth of, should that person really be the killer? And is that really realistic? And is that this? And is that that? And I was like 2 weeks ago, there was a discussion of a huge human trafficking case. And when it came out who was behind the trafficking ring, boy, did I print out that article and send it to everybody and be like, we were right. We were right. It is not crazy, because it's the people you trust in your community, the ones that you're telling your kids to trust, that sometimes are the perpetrators of the crimes. And so it was very, in a way, it was validating to know that even things that we were creating from our own creative brain, we were so grounded in the authenticity of the stories we were trying to tell that we were inadvertently hitting real life stories without even trying. It's validating, but then it's also sad, because it reminds me of the world I'm also raising my kids in, and how we have to just do better as a society by them to save them from things like this, so that we don't keep finding these stories happening. So it's a mix of all of the above. It's a mix of personal, it's a mix of things that have happened in real life. It's all of the above. And quite frankly, even crew. And that's what I mean by people pouring their heart and soul into the project. When I'm on set and I have a crew member come up to me and they're like, I read that script and it reminded me of this time in my childhood when da 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 da. And you can use that if you want to. And everyone was so generous, even down to PAs on set, all of it. Everyone sort of just latched on and was like, oh, we telling this story? Okay, cool. We gonna tell this story. And all contributed to what you guys are now seeing on screen.
Hi, yes. The question that I do want to ask, because I do want to say, first of all, as I'm listening to more, because I'm a mom as well, I have a 5-year-old. So like the whole fears and everything, I completely 100% get. As I'm listening, I'm like, oh, that's another thing I need to remind myself to tell her, you know, watch out for this person, watch out for that person type of thing. But the question I want to ask, since it sounds like it was such a huge, massive collaboration, even though Nkechi, you said that you've had this script and this project, kind of, you've been living with it for a while before bringing on Demain and the actors and everyone else. But what is the tone like on set for something like this, for a project like this, that's very intentional with the writing, with the acting, and then, like you said, everybody sharing their stories of what they went through, and even with Demain having like a callback memory after reading the script and what it brought back to her? What is the tone like on set for something like this?
I cannot live in shadows. I have to live in light. I have to, otherwise I would not get out of bed. I would not function. And so my sets on all of my shows are reflective of that. because I'm like, we get to make magic for a living. Even when we're telling stories that might be a little darker or a little more of a reality check of the world we're living in, we still get to make magic for a living. That is the most amazing, beautiful gift. And so if you're not finding a way to skip, cartwheel, and dance it out on set on our way to doing this, especially when it's a heavier subject matter, we're probably not the right production for you. And so it's one of those things where the 13-year-old Nigerian girl in me who was living in the Côte d'Ivoire, who was obsessed with television, she is still at the forefront when I'm on set, because I love watching everyone bring their expertise. I love watching our production designer get so excited about the type of wood he used for Mostly and Associates. I'm like, you know what? I'm happy with you. Yes, wood. Let's celebrate the wood. Everyone is bringing what they do so beautifully to a project that, quite frankly, they don't have to. They could come in, they could, cash their check, they could do their job, but they bring such joy to the way they do their job that I'm like, oh, we're taking a moment to celebrate this. And so that is very much the vibe on set. Yes, we get the work done. Yes, there are heavy subject matters. It's really important to me that people feel taken care of while we're dealing with these subject matters. Our young actress, Azaria Carter, who plays young teen Gabby, she has one set. It is the farmhouse, and it is all trauma. She's not hanging out in scenes with the other cast members. Like, this is Gabby's past. And so it was very important to us that we do not damage this young lady in real life in service of this storyline. So she never gets a break. All her scenes are in the farmhouse. All her scenes are her in some way fighting for her life. And she is a phenomenal actress. And so it'd be one of those things where, if a director wanted to keep rolling and she'd be like, no, I'm fine. We can just roll into that. I'd be like, oh, no, we're going to yell cut. We're going to have a little bit of a dance party. Mark Paul, you were going to speak to her outside of Sir's voice. We're going to anchor her back into her real beautiful life before we send her back into, and again, being so generous with her talent and time and everything, she's like, no, I know time's of the essence. Like, we could just keep going. But more important than making the day is making sure that our cast and crew are healthy at the end of that day we made. And so if that requires a pause, if that requires there was always music playing at Video Village, if that requires a dance break, you do not have to dance along with me or Demaine when we're dancing to Beyonce, but we will dance. Those are all the things we do to make sure that people know that we remember what's important in the making of this story.
Yeah, I would always come to set with a tremendous amount of joy, not just because knowing that this is a show that I know will do good, has already done good, knowing not just I get the privilege to work with NK and this incredible cast and crew, and that the show will entertain, but that we will live in these moments and everyone does their work, and then people will laugh and people will take a break, and NK will dance and she will all sing and play, and you will hear Shanola Hampton singing from 200 feet away as she comes to set. She has a beautiful singing voice, and that we're all going to get hugs at the beginning, at the end, and during. And so that part was really wonderful. It was really like nourishing to be in that. And in spite of the material, we still had so much light. And that's, that's the way NK rolls, which I loved. We would still laugh in the middle of the tears.
Wow, that sounds absolutely beautiful. And I think that that's amazing that you guys nurtured such an environment on set. And it's a beautiful, beautiful project. You guys are beautiful. Everything's beautiful. Love you.
Thank you so much.
Well, ladies, we can't wait to see more of this TV series. It is really, really, really good. And we're all certainly looking forward to seeing the next episode tonight. On behalf of the world's largest group of Black film and TV critics, thank you for watching this episode of AAFCA Roundtables. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.